I'm very pleased to invite a friend of mine, Jen Slattery, to come and talk to us about Southern Highlands Australian Plant Society. So welcome, Jen. I'm not a member of the Southern Highlands Australian Plant Society. I don't actually know much about them, and I feel a little bit intimidated by people who know about plants. So Jen, tell me, what is the Australian Plant Society?
The Australian Plant Society, what we're about is inspiring people to enjoy, grow and conserve our native plants.
Mm-hmm.
They're just so wonderful and beautiful. It's a state-based society. So each of our states and territories have their own plant society, and they pretty much operate how they want to operate. So what suits their state. In New South Wales, we've got around 20 district groups. So Southern Highlands is one of those district groups.
Mm-hmm.
And what that allows us to do is whatever it is that suits our district. What do we want to be involved in or not? What are our activities? What's our focus? Which is really good from a grassroots perspective.
And so you've still got some control of the agenda.
Absolutely.
Yeah, great.
Some of the groups do walks and talks. Some groups have reserves that they look after or gardens that they look after, and some actually run nurseries,
wow.
which is a big job. So what we're interested in from a Southern Highlands perspective is we want to promote knowledge and appreciation of the native flora, but especially something that's unique to the Southern Highlands. And whether that's unique in that it's only found here in the Highlands or because of our temperature or elevation or things like that, we focus on that, what's good for us.
Local.
Local.
Yeah.
Definitely. We also are interested in the botanical features of a plant and their care and propagation. So we want to know what's about this plant. Some plants have some really tricky things going on with them, how you can propagate them or how they work or the cycles that they go through. We're also interested in the plant's place in our gardens and our bushland, because that may or may not be the same thing, and how that works in the wider environment. So it's really interesting that you can have two plants, one's in your garden, and you might treat that totally different to how it's treated in the bushland.
I am quite interested in that when I'm in the bush, I see a plant which is thriving just on shitty looking soil. And I've purchased it and put it in my garden and nurtured it, and it just looks crummy. And, it's growing in the bush 2 kilometres away.
Absolutely. Then you go, why? What am I doing wrong?
Yeah,
I've tried
that's
to
right.
propagate plants, and there's one specific one that it's growing in my garden. Try and put it into seed raising mix. No, not going to germinate. Germinate all through my gardens and things. Absolutely. Okay, just let me germinate
Just
and I'll
go with that.
Yeah.
And what type of activities does the group undertake?
Our activities are mainly walks and talks.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have meetings, and some of our guest speakers we have is like the What's Killing Our Southern Highlands Trees, where we worked with Wind Zero and Council and a number of other organisations, and that dealt with Phytophthora out in the environment. And it wasn't just about Australian native plants. A lot of conifers are dying from Phytophthora, and it was about Phytophthora as a biosecurity issue. And we had an amazing amount of people come out from a whole range of different organisations and businesses, like arborists, people who sell exotic trees and tree farms and things like that. So it was a really interesting topic. We've also had a talk on plant breeding, which was really interesting. We've also had a talk on biodiversity, the farmer's dilemma. How do you manage a farm and biodiversity and making sure you're getting an income and doing all of this at the same time? So that was interesting. We also have a guest speaker who told us about the Robertson rainforest. And then we had another speaker on grasses, which can be really complicated. That was very interesting. It is. What grass is that?
Yes, yeah, you're right.
We also, as part of our events, go and visit local and regional gardens. So the
Oh,
local gardens are usually our members' gardens, and they are diverse.
Mm.
We've got one that's an urban forest in the middle of Bowral.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
We've got ones that are native cottage gardens, native meadows.
Oh, so you
Which are-
can do all kinds of
You can
things
do all
with native
kind of
plants.
things. We've got other members, their gardens are a mix. Exotics, natives, whatever it is that they like. And we also have other people who have got smaller rural properties, maybe a few acres or maybe up to 25 acres, and they're regenerating. Regenerating the bush.
Wow.
But again, how they regenerate the bush versus how they look after the garden around the house can be two totally different things. So we go out and visit their gardens, which is lovely. The other thing we do is do regional gardens. So we've just recently been down to the Wollongong Botanic Gardens, which is near the university. And they have a range of different Australian gardens. That was really interesting. There was waratahs out. There was beautiful Sydney rock orchids.
Oh.
Just an amazing mix of things in that garden. They had an Australian arid garden. They also had a tiny forest, which seems to be really popular at the moment.
Yes, I'm reading about them a bit at the moment.
It's one to go and see. It's only 2 years old, and these trees are like, the trees that are in there are huge, pretty tall. And I was just amazed with that tiny forest and its local natives in there. The rest of the gardens also has roses and azaleas and rhododendrons.
Oh, right.
and
It's
things.
not just a native garden.
It's not just native. They've kept a lot of their older trees, which are just beautiful in there. But you see this eucalypt, then you've got all these beautiful roses underneath. So it's a wonderful place to go and see specific gardens. You've got some of the native things, their rainforest. It was a lovely place. Lots of tables and chairs, nice place to visit. So if you're ever down that way, I recommend.
Rightio, I'll
go
keep it
and
in
visit.
mind.
The other garden we've got coming up, which will be soon, is to the Walcott Garden in Canberra.
All right. I don't know anything about this.
I didn't know anything about it, but apparently it's been on Australian Open Gardens.
All right.
They actually made it to be a stamp.
Oh.
That's pretty flash. It's a premier native garden in Canberra. There are a few exotics in there. I think it used to be some sort of diplomatic garden or something like that. And they've restored it over the years. So we're going to visit that garden. So that should be really exciting.
Yeah.
And being Canberra, being a cold climate garden.
You're going to come back inspired.
Yes. We also do walks and talks for seasonal bushwalking, where we've got places of plants that are of interest or biodiversity. So we've been out to Medway Reserve, which many people may not have heard about. It's west of Berrima, right out on Medway Road, right out at the end. And we did the great Southern Bio Blitz. So we went out with our cameras and, mobile phones really, and recorded all the different species. So it's not just plants, but animals and insects and things like that. And we went out and as a group to have a look at all of that. What we found, though, we had
You should see Jenny's eyes, everybody. Her eyes have just lit up. What did you find, Jen?
a range extension for a threatened species.
Oh, wow.
I know, we were very impressed.
This was of a plant, presumably.
Was of a plant. It was Grevillea Ray Brownii, who's a very famous person in the Grevillea world.
Oh, right.
And it hadn't been found that far where it was found.
Oh,
it hadn't been found there.
right.
So we had a nice range extension.
Oh, very good.
And some plants that were a bit rare. They weren't threatened or anything like that. So it was
but
really...
you don't see every day.
You don't see that every day. So it was really lovely getting out there. So it was a bushwalk, but with a bit of a mission.
Yeah. Yeah, great.
The other gardens that we're going to... Well, not gardens, reserves. Coming up, we're doing a fern walk with a local ecologist up at Mount Gibraltar.
Oh.
So that should be interesting to see what's growing there. I'm not so good with bushwalks. Did you see this? Did you see that? No, I didn't see any of those things. So they can pick out, well, where do you look to find a lot of these things? So I'm hoping to learn a little bit from the ecologist.
Yeah, that's... look, I feel like that when I'm out with my mates. They see orchids everywhere. And I've just walked past them. I haven't noticed. I mean, many orchids are quite self-effacing. But yeah, once you've learnt and got your eye in, you're more likely to find things, aren't you?
Absolutely. You do have to get your eye in. Sometimes it's a shape or something like that. But how do you learn those things? So coming along to events really helps. And you don't have to have knowledge of these things. That's where you learn. My knowledge on ferns is not very good. Yes, that's a maidenhair fern. I think that's about it.
So that was going to be another one of my questions. One of the reasons why I haven't really considered joining is because I don't really actually know that much about Australian plants, and I feel like I might be surrounded by very knowledgeable people and just feel intimidated by the whole thing.
That's okay. You don't have to have any knowledge about Australian plants to join the group. We do have some people who have a wide range of knowledge. Their knowledge is extensive and it just astounds me. And we have people who have no knowledge. They're people who are here to learn. And a lot of our members do like to be able to share their information with people. You've kind of got to ask. They're not pushy and say you need to do this or you need to do that. If they find out what you're trying to achieve, there's usually somebody who's able to point you in the right direction, give you ideas that you might want to try or not try. That's up to you. What grows well in one part of the Highlands doesn't necessarily grow in a different part of the Highlands. So it's just things to think about rather than you must do this.
Right. And so there's no test questions on entry?
No test questions, no, nothing like that. And we do provide, I think, a really friendly and collaborative learning space to learn about these plants. Nobody knows everything about every single plant. We can all learn that way. So, yeah, you don't need to know all these things.
And do I have to swear off ever planting a European plant?
No. You can plant whatever you like in your garden. Some of our members, they have both exotic and native plants because that suits what they would like to have. Some are doing habitat gardens and they're looking at the birds and the insects, so they'll choose the plants that will suit that. And some people, and this might be saying a little bit too much about me, aren't really that much gardeners. I can do a few bits and pieces, but no, I'm not the best gardener in the world.
Right. You're a laissez-faire gardener.
Yes. But I'm really interested in the plants that are growing in the bushland or on my bushwalks. So being out there to see those plants. So you don't have to be a gardener. You can plant whatever you want in your garden. You might have other interests. It's not all about just gardening and growing, although I have some special plants that I might pop in occasionally. And I also have some exotic plants, like my daffodils and freesias, except for the wallaby keeps eating the freesias. So, yeah, and I've got my dad's plants that came down. He's since passed, but he had some bromeliads and some exotic orchids. And so they're in the garden, they just pop them in.
Amongst everything.
Yeah, so you don't have to have all of that.
And what do you say to people who say, oh, I don't want to put in Australian plants because they get very scrappy?
Sure. There's a perception out there that Australian plants, you just put it in the ground and don't worry about it again.
Yeah, I think in the 70s that was really pushed, wasn't it? You just stick them in and take no notice thereafter. Yeah.
They do. If you want the plants to thrive, like any plant, you do need to water, fertilise, but with an Australian native fertiliser. You do need to prune because in nature, the birds, like the rosellas and the cockatoos and things, they do a lot of pruning of plants, the tip pruning, and you might need to mulch. There's always leaf litter around out in the bush. So you do need to do those things. It doesn't require as much as an exotic plant, but they still do need some tender loving care if you want them to look really good. What's happening globally, though, have you heard of rewilding?
I have, but I haven't really read into it. Tell us about that.
So across the world, people are bringing back natural processes and natives specific to their area into their gardens, onto their lawns, onto their verges, in their balconies. Some of them, like over in Europe, they're even getting down to their windowsill gardens.
Oh, windowsill, yeah. Wow.
Well, having pollinators come in, the bees are really needing our help, and the pollinators that are there. So rewilding has been happening on a larger scale, like in big bushland reserves or big reserves around the world, and now people have taken it on and having it in their gardens. So it does look a little bit messy, but I say check it out. See, it's a really big thing in England, and people are getting rid of their lawns and making it like a
a meadow.
Yeah. And guess what? You don't have to mow your lawn anymore. And you don't have to fertilise it and things like that. So it's
I can see some consistent themes in what you're saying.
So that's a real global phenomenon. Every continent is doing this.
Yeah. So listeners will know that I'm always saying we should all be having messy gardens, that they're the ones that pull in the insects, and the insects bring in the birds. And, lots of other insects aside from bees are also pollinators. So we want everybody in our garden. So that sounds really interesting.
Yeah. And there's also plant databases available for your specific garden. So the Australian Plant Society in New South Wales, it's got a plant database. It's got over 1,000 plants in it. And what they're trying to do is provide information about all the different species that they're growing, and give some botanical information and also some propagation information about how to propagate them, how to grow them, but also for those that aren't as common as what you would find in a nursery. From the plant breeder talk, it's really expensive to bring a plant to the general public, whether it's native or an exotic. So it takes a lot of money and time to get this happening. I don't know about you, but you go out in the bush and you think, well, I live on a bushland block, and I'll go out there and think, oh, I'd love to have that in my garden. How do I propagate that? So their site is looking at those types of plants. And then our Australian Plant Society at an Australian level, they've got a database that you can just tick on and go, I want something that grows in New South Wales, and I want it to have pink flowers, and I want it to flower in spring, and I want it to be this tall.
Wow.
And it will come back with all of your different plants.
So these resources that you're referring to, can anyone access those?
Absolutely.
Right.
They're free on their websites, and you just go through and
wow, that's a good hint, everybody. Yeah.
I find both of the databases work really well together, because sometimes I just want something pretty in the garden.
Yeah.
And sometimes I want something a bit more specific.
Well, at the moment, for example, I've had one plant die, and so now I've just got this space which is surrounded by other low-ish plants, but it's not going to get a lot of sun. But if I could just go in and say, I need a plant that will fit precisely this size and not a lot of sun, blah, blah, then I've just got to find the plant. But we're well on the way.
Yeah, and it gives you ideas of what you can, what is available, and what can fill in those niches.
Oh, that's a great piece of information, Jen. So if I want to join the Southern Highlands Australian Plant Society, SHAPS everyone calls it, everybody, how do I go about that?
Okay. Because we're a state-based organisation, we go to Australian Plant Society, New South Wales, and you join at a state level. You then can select a district group, so Southern Highlands, and you can select numerous district groups.
So you can be a member of
a number.
Wow,
so
great.
You might want to do ones that are close by. If you live in the south of the Shire, you might want to be also a member of the Southern Tablelands, or you might want to be a member of the Illawarra, or you've got family and friends that live up on the north coast, you might want to join their district groups. So you can join one district group, or you can join numerous. It doesn't cost any more money. So you join at the state level, and then you say which district group would you like to be a member of.
Fantastic. And then will someone from the group contact you?
Yes.
Great.
You'll be contacted, usually from at the state level and from the district group that you joined.
Excellent. Thank you. And can we find you anywhere on social media?
From SHAP's perspective, no. Well, no. We have a web page, which is on the state level one, if you just typed in Southern Highlands Australian Plant Society, and that has our newsletters and things like that. And we do email members. But at the state level, they have, again, their website, but they've also got a Facebook page and Instagram.
Right.
So you can find out information through
From them.
those. Yep.
Great. Thank you. So, Jen, you've almost got me over the line. What's the best part about being a member of SHAPS?
Becoming immersed in nature and meeting up with like-minded people.
Yeah.
Being able to share those experiences with people and the health benefits.
Oh, yes. Tell me about the health benefits.
Being out in nature, that you would know from whether it's wildlife, spotting birds, or being out with the plants, lowers your blood pressure, increases your immune system, enhances self-esteem, gets you over your anxieties. A day out in the garden or a day out in nature is just a lovely thing
It's
to
a
do.
therapeutic experience.
Absolutely.
It is. Yeah.
And that's what I really enjoy about being a member, because there are events and talks and it just gets you out there to see what's out in our beautiful nature.
Very good. What's the achievement that you're most proud of that your group has done?
We've had a lot of activities and a lot of meetings, but the thing that I'm most proud of is the group dynamics.
Oh, yes.
Our group members are really positive people. There's no dramas or hassles. They're very optimistic about life, which is wonderful. And so I find that it makes our group fun and relaxed.
Oh, that's great.
And that I'm really proud to be a member of the group. So I think the group dynamics is really important with our social groups. Things just happen and, like I said, no dramas, no hassles.
From various things I've heard from different people, I think a lot of that comes down to the leadership of your group. I've heard lots of really positive things about the SHAPS committee. Well, thank you very much for coming in and talking to us, Jen. I hope that the conversation has inspired the listeners to join and at least to go and have a look at some of those websites and take advantage of all the information that the Australian Plant Society has got out there online.
Well, thank you for having me. It was really enjoyable. I've got to admit, this is the first time I've ever done something like this. So it's wonderful. And if people do decide to join up and come along to our events, please introduce yourself.
Yes,
And just let me know your name or something like that. I'd love to meet our new members, and it'd be interesting to see from the podcast.
Yes, tell Jen I heard about it on the podcast. Thanks for coming, Jen.
Thank you.